Boots on the other foot today, so me and Guy love to interview you. Plus, we also really want to try our hats at being reporters as well. So we know that you're both the oracles of bridging, at the epicenter of everything in the market, get first sight of everything as well. So this is just an incredible opportunity for both of us to get a unique perspective from you both. So for starters, how has your perception of the bridging market changed over the last few years?
Well, I joined the market at the start of 2014, I think it was, end of 2013, early 2014, when I joined Medianett, and I guess if we're looking at, 8 years, that's right, isn't it, 8 years? It's very different to what it is now. So it depends if you want to look at the last couple of years or in that kind of time period. So, I mean, a huge amount changed in that time. I mean, so from that point, there were a lot fewer lenders. There were the professionalism and the standards in the market weren't as high as they are today. And there are better offerings now. There's more knowledge, and there's also more transparency. There can always be more, but that is definitely something which we're seeing. And also LinkedIn has kind of boomed in the last few years, for our market anyway. So more people are calling people out on there, and kind of holding people up to a certain standard, which I think is pretty important. Whereas before, I don't think there was as much of that. And from a journalism perspective, there weren't as many PR companies in the space when I joined. So actually, we didn't get a huge amount of content. It was very much we had to be out on the road, out talking to people, interviewing people, making our own content, but making our own content. And because there wasn't a huge amount being pushed out, we had to find it. While we still do that now, that we are bombarded with press, we're bombarded with news stories, and we have to really kind of cherry pick the stuff which we know that our readers are going to be interested in. So that's quite an interesting kind of change which has happened, while we still obviously create our own content and make it as interesting as possible. We do have a lot more to choose from, and that is just based on the fact that businesses have grown. There are more lenders in the space, or brokers in the space, and just more third parties and companies, communications companies that they work with. So that's a huge one. Also small lenders that when I joined at the time are now big lenders, have a lot more market share, have larger offices, turned into banks, for example. Even their branding and marketing, which I'm sure Caron will probably talk about, has completely changed, looks way better. We don't have as many marketing emails with just pictures of bridges on them, which we did. So we've also seen many lenders come and go over that period of time. And another thing for me actually is ego is still a huge thing in the market, but I think back then that was almost like the sole thing, and people almost relied on personality and relationships back then, whereas now I don't think you can rely on that at all. It's still, trust and relationships are a key thing in this space. You can't rely on it at all. You have to really follow through with what you say, and I think that's a really good and positive thing.
Good, very good. And Caron, you have
I think Beth's absolutely right. It's become so much more ubiquitous as a product and well known. I miss the education aspect though. I miss the drive for, everything was about lenders and brokers partnering to educate the wider market to get the product out there. So maybe the job's been done to a certain extent, which is why there isn't as much going on. But I recall there just being, roadshow after roadshow and seminar after seminar, and everything was about making sure that the product was, was shaking off its stigma. So I think that's something that's definitely changed. And I know that there have been murmurs in the market recently about paying a little bit more attention to the education, especially as loads of mainstream brokers in particular have moved into the space. It's pretty crucial that we pick that back up again, and not take it for granted that everyone knows how to use it, to its full extent. So I think that's a big difference. to look at it from the flip side, so as not to obviously repeat everything that Beth said, which is absolutely correct and accurate, I'm more shocked by the things that haven't changed and the things that have some of the conversation points that have stayed the same. They're not all altogether positive, so it's not the best way to start a conversation about the market, I appreciate. But it's interesting to me that we're never, I think, to Beth's point about the ego, to it being a cottage industry, to it being a community and a club-like concept, this, I don't think we've moved that far away from it yet. Yes, there's increased interest from institutions and more, I suppose, high-profile funders and partners who now want to look into the market, partially because I suppose its returns and its stability has been proven over the last decade or so, when naturally before this, I think there was always that worry about the instability of it. There were still lenders, going under, for lack of a better phrase, whereas that doesn't happen in quite the sensational way as it used to. And I think, but just because of all that, I do think that the makeup of the market is really similar to what it was. I think that it still relies on relationships a lot. I think it still relies on ego a lot. I don't think it should, and that's something we'll probably come on to later in the conversation. I think that's an area for improvement. But it's something that, again, the events of the last year have come full circle, because I think we were going more mainstream. And my opinion is that the last 12 months have actually caused us to revert back to some of the habits and the models of 10 years ago, in that the small, very, I want to see the whites of your eyes type lending, as opposed to making it too hands-off, i.e. mainstream. That would be my take on it. And I think I think, again, a year ago, if you'd asked me the same question, it would have been a slightly different answer, but we've learned a lot about exactly what this market stands for in the last year.
So COVID aside, I think that we can see that it has been a more professional market. I absolutely take your point on education. It's really strong for all of us here to educate us on not just the product and the criteria. So I think you've played your part in over the last 10 years or so of professionalising the industry yourselves. But just on that point that you raised there, Caron, what do you think it needs to take us to that next phase then, to get out of that ego, to get to the next phase that you probably visualise it and want it to be like?
I think that in any space where it's super competitive, this is going to be really difficult to break the mold. We have these because we're always holding people to account, and we're always asking interrogating questions. And sometimes we see a new lender launch and we're so judgmental about the way that they've launched, because we're not seeing the commercial aspect to it all the time. We have these lofty ideals of what the market should look like, when in actual fact everyone's just trying to make some money. I think this is something that we maybe need to remember and be a bit more down to earth about, or a little bit realistic about, that this is still commercial, it's still about making money, but then factoring in wider sustainability issues about how we can ensure the future of the market. Because it's been through rocky times before, and it will face rocky times again, just by pure dint of the risk factor. This is, to me, this is just a given. The same way as people say, we faced one pandemic, our vulnerabilities will expose us to more. I just think that that's what's ahead of us. So we need to all be looking at how to bolster ourselves against that potential, and making sure that our teams are made up of sustainable elements, be that human resources wise, or funding, or who we choose to work with and how we choose to work with them. How much are you paying people to work with them? It goes off into all these different factions. But I think we could take a leaf out of taking the best of the old world and the best of what just makes common sense in a business, with a sustainable business model. And I don't think that all lenders and all brokers actually have an eye on that.
Yeah. Okay. A very, very good point. Just coming on to picking up on one of your points there, Caron, was the ego, and I'm quite interested to see what you classify as an ego within this space. Like what have you seen, or what behaviour have you seen across this sector that constitutes towards that?
Well, I mean, Beth mentioned it first, and one of the things that we have a real issue with is starting a lender in you. It sounds so biblical, in your own likeness. So you'll get one linchpin, kingpin, whatever you want to call them, and they'll create the lender around their morals, their standing in the market. And this is just not sustainable. You can't survive a business off the back of one person's personality, to what Beth was saying. I think this is such an interesting, purely narcissistic way to start a business. I understand why people do it, because your standing in the market is what will get you traction to start with. Makes complete sense. But that will then filter onto surrounding yourself with people in your business that only echo your own view and only echo your own kind of take on the market, who look like you, sound like you, do business like you, which makes your business incredibly one-dimensional.
I completely agree. The amount of times it's actually really disheartening to announce the launch of a new lender and then the picture that goes alongside that is a line of white men who all kind of look and sound the same and have the same views. I find you're kind of starting a company in, let's say, 2021 or 2020 or whenever, that is just not representative of the industry and what it should be, and that isn't the direction that this market should be taking, or any market should be taking. So you need to start how you want to go on, and that's the best way to do that. And there are so many people who are in need of jobs at the moment that you don't really have a reason not to have a diverse team. I mean, that's just what's happening right now. You should have a diverse team anyway, but there is really no argument for not having a diverse team now, or even like having a plan to change that.
Just touching on which we were going to come to a little bit later, but while we're on it, the diversity point in our sector, and you really hit on it there, Beth, with the token white male launching the specialist lender, and it is a very important point. And I think from my personal perspective, obviously it isn't about me, I'm going to you guys this, but I think over the last 18 months we have seen changes, but clearly there's a heck of a lot more that needs to be done, whether it's racially, sexually, diversification within our sector. So I suppose a question for you both, that what points and what areas do you think can be improved on, and what short-term gains can we get, and how can the industry adapt quicker? And if you look at it compared to other industries, we are lagging behind a long way, even if you compare our sector to the banking world, for example, where diversity has happened in a much greater impact than we're seeing in our space. So what are they doing different, and how can we learn from it, and what can we do in our space as a collective to improve?
I think every business needs to look at their team, take a good look, and question, how diverse is this team? How many people are Black in your office? How many people are women? What roles are they holding? Are they on the board? Are they in management? Are they in admin? You really need to ask those questions. And then also, once you've dissected what the diversity level is in your business, then to say, why is that the case? If you've got a less diverse team, how welcoming is that to attract a diverse workforce? Because attracting and retaining staff are two very different things. And I know Caron's writing an article at the moment about that for the next issue of the B&C magazine. And it's something which we've been kind of talking about for years and writing about. But if you attract people, do they have other people that can support them and that they can go to with issues that they might be facing because the culture's not right? You have to have, to actually retain staff, you need to have that as well. So I think that's something why, maybe why we're not as diverse as we can be. It's definitely improving. It has improved since I've joined anyway. There are still the go-to women that we end up having to go to for panelist discussions, for article comments, because there aren't enough new women coming in. And also when there are, they're not given the opportunity. So I think one of the first things to do, if you've got look at your team, you've got a diverse team, have you given media training to an equal number of men and women in your team? Because the amount of times, so something we do to push this is we actually pick people. So we've got an article, and if we decide we want to speak to 5 lenders and 5 brokers, we make sure that we're also speaking to 5 women and 5 men, and try and get them from diverse backgrounds if we can. Obviously, the most important thing is to get the information we need, but we also, you know, if you've got a head of credit at a company who happens to be a woman, they're going to know what they're talking about. But to go to them and then pass it on to a man because they've had the media training, or they're the go-to face of the company because they do the sales side, or whatever the case is, it's just not on to me. They need to have the confidence, and that has to be instilled by management from their company, and they need to trust them to be able to talk about what they do on a day-to-day basis. So that's a huge thing for me. The amount of times we had obviously National Women's Day recently, and our website was completely covered in women and their stories. And I was saying to Caron, this is fantastic. I want us to be more of a staple, you know, to have more women on the homepage. And it hasn't stayed the same. Those women spoke for that day, and I guess their businesses pushed them out on that day. But where are they now? So PR companies need to do a huge push on this. So if your PR company is not pushing you to have a woman comment in press releases that you're putting out, why are you working with them? You need to be working with a diverse company that's actually putting those agendas to you and saying, this is better for you. You're going to get more coverage as well, because people want more female comments. So I think there are just a few things which I think can help increase diversity. Like you say, you know, high street banks and other sectors are pushing forward with this. So this is just another way to do it.
I think the opportunities are there to be seen as well, because it's not just diversity for diversity's sake, it's the cognitive diversity that allows you, for people from different cultures, gender, race, that brings in. And actually, you're right, Beth, to pull in other people from the same cultures as well, and know that there's going to be that sustainability and opportunity going forward. So what do you think our sector needs to do to appeal to the next generation of talent as we take a sustainability part further?
I think that these things are quite linked, because young people are intrinsically attached to values that maybe a slightly older generation aren't. And one of those things is how diverse the businesses are that they're working with. What are their policies in detail, not just what you have to do legally, but what are their internal actual policies on culture and growth? There's numerous reports saying that it's in our sector in particular, that people will move not for money, but for better prospects. And I think the idea of prospects needs to be maybe broadened as well, so that it's not just job role, it's growth, it's lateral growth, and it's responsibilities, and it's being a part of the fabric of something that actually means something. I think one of the things that I've sort of realized about this market is that in any space where it's super frenetic and everyone's just trying to do business and it never stops, the priority list of like these things that we think are necessary and not optional anymore, I feel like that list gets shuffled a bit. So it's a case of, well, whose responsibility is it to start these movements? I'm too busy to start a gender program. To attract a new generation to this market, everyone needs to think about aspects that they didn't have to think about when they set up. They need to really review and rethink constantly. And like Beth said, have a look around your space. Is this indicative of society? Is this indicative of the customer base that you want to grow into as well? This is such a crucial point. And Jamie, as you mentioned, variety of cognitive approaches, you know, how if you all come from a similar background, all same, look the same, feel the same, whatever, how can your business be that thing that is filling the gaps that you want it to? However, if that is your model and you're very binary and that's all that you want to do, then by all means, that's probably a place for you. But we need to, again, to your question, if you want to attract better, diverse people for productivity and bottom line reasons, that's what I think every business has to do. They need to be like extremely critical about what their status is now. And it's dark and it's messy because you're going to have to look at the state of it. And the chances are quite good it's going to be completely subpar. Most businesses are not hitting the nail on the head when it comes to a culture that they can be proud of. Let's just be honest, all of us. So I think doing that bit of work is critical for that.
I think there's a clear guide without cognizant diversity. I think that if you wanted the quickest relay team in the world, you'd have the 4 quickest runners. But with COVID there and everything they need to do to get out the multi-vaccines that are out there, we needed people from different backgrounds to actually create those vaccines. It wouldn't have been right if it was just everyone doing the same.
Absolutely.
So segueing into COVID, you've heard of it, happened over the last year, hasn't it? Still happening. What do you think our sector has learned from COVID, and what changes do you think that you hope that we continue with?
Well, I mean, this also kind of follows on from your last question about attracting new people to the market. Throughout COVID, flexible working has been proven to work, and also I'm hoping will mean that we see a hybrid approach continue in the future, which will mean we can attract more talents, which has been an issue over the last few years because the amount of lenders in the space. Increased productivity, we definitely felt it. We've been more productive. There are times when you do need to be in office and you need to be with people, but I think there's a huge argument for having a hybrid approach. Also, you'll have happier staff and better work-life balances. So I'm hoping that is something that we continue. I know I've seen loads of posts, and I know a lot of companies are back in the office full time. If that works for your model better and that's what your staff want, then great. But I think there should always be an option if people work better as a hybrid model. I hope more businesses continue to be more empathetic to their staff's well-being and their individual circumstances. I reckon many managers and business owners probably found out things that they never knew about their teams before COVID. And I think this should be the norm. I don't think it should just be working and that's it. I think it really needs to be about, finding out about who you're working with. And that is just something which I think we've kind of talked about a lot throughout this conversation already. Really finding out about people's cultures and backgrounds and not just talking to people who are the same as you. So I'm hoping that continues. I know that this isn't really talking about, businesses kind of what they've changed internally, but this is something which I think many businesses in many sectors should be doing going forward.
Do you feel that we could be at risk of COVID setting back the diversity and the cultures in businesses in our space that have been developed over the last 2 to 3 years, 5 years, for example? And the culture in the workplace is incredibly huge to any business. People are 99% of a business. Without them, there's no one. It's just the fact of the way it is. But do you think there's a risk that, the remote working has proven to be effective? We've all adapted well to it. But could we have stepped back? Could we have taken 2 forward and 1.5 back, and the progress has been lost slightly?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it will improve diversity because you'll have, especially women who have families or children and have found it difficult to kind of re-enter work after maternity leave, for example, to have almost like more part-time roles and more flexibility on kind of where their hours are. I think that will increase diversity. For culture, you have to have a hybrid approach, in my opinion. I don't think you can, everyone solely work from home and that's all you do. I think you need to have that kind of get together, even if it's not working. It's like we meet on a Friday afternoon and we all go to the pub and that's our get together or whatever the case is. Or you have a couple of days in the office where you do all your team meetings. So I think that's something which you need to do for culture. But for diversity, I think it improves it to have the flexible working. I don't think it detracts from that at all. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Caron.
I actually think that the trust factor between employers and employees has changed and improved. And I think this is kind of an awkward thing to bring up, but I think that maybe more employers are assessing people on their output and their actual impact now than they were when things were in a normal office-based environment. There's a lot of aspects to an office-based culture, an in-person culture, that I think could muddy the waters. In the sense that there is a very real, it is not a comfortable thing to acknowledge, but there's a very real tribal aspect between employers and who they want to employ, whether people like to admit it or not. That is a thing that exists. And I think that this period of removing yourself from your in-person impressions of someone based on latent bias is actually been distanced, and this is an interesting thing to maybe carry forward with us. The idea of trusting employees, sometimes brand new people, with all your systems, with remote working, with getting the job done, this I think feeds into opening one's mind as an employer into a whole raft of new people that you may not have considered for whatever reason, whether it's location based or a multitude of other things. We've all, not all of us, I know that not every single business has thrived during this period, and there were some serious hiccups at the beginning with a lot of models, but we've all proven that we can translate our productivity in the hardest, most difficult period. And surely that should go some way to some employers banishing some of the bias that I think that they have. So in answer to your question, I think it's a convoluted answer and it's a little bit awkward, but it's what I think may be a contributing factor to actually improving the agenda.
Yeah, and I think, one point you picked up that I hadn't really thought of with the benefits of COVID is the remote working. And as you say, the diversity, maybe someone could come on board who has a kid, new young family at home and doesn't have the time to come to the office, but that opens up a job opportunity for them. And personally, appreciated the impact of that. So yeah, it could improve the gender, which is great.
And there's a lot of work, emotional, what they call unpaid labor that women tends to be our responsibility, whether it's childcare or whether it's actually just caring for someone who isn't well, or someone who isn't able, or somebody who is older, whatever the case is, and it tends to fall on women, like, by and large. And these are all things that can prevent you from progressing in the workplace. And again, remote working, flexible system setups have allowed us to renegotiate the terms of what makes you a valuable employee. And I don't think that just being in the office from 9 to 5 should be a factor that sits you above another in terms of how you're valued.
Yeah.
So all these efforts, impacts, and obviously measuring people by productivity, and the hybrid roles that you suggest, people working in obviously the geographical base, that all points towards a better technology base, doesn't it? Each lender, the need for that. How important do you think technology will play a part in, I suppose, the specialist lending sector over the next year, and where do you see the specialist lending market being in 5 years' time? So there's a big question for you.
I mean, we wrestled back and forth with this tech thing in bridging in particular, because so many people, it depends what you define as tech. Internal systems. Internal systems, CRMs, broker portals, all of this, fine, whatever kind of, I don't know. I just feel like sometimes it's just like a thing that lenders and brokers just kind of tack on, and they're like, this is what we've got. It really doesn't make that much of a difference until you get to a scale where it's like, sausage factory style stuff. When we're talking about automation, I struggle, and the evidence of the struggle is all the sourcing systems and portals that like launch and disappear and launch and disappear, and you know, we're guilty of this. We've also picked a lot of them up because we believed in them. And I think we're never going to get to the point in a specialist industry that thrives off structuring complex deals. Full automation to me is a pipe dream. I'm putting it out there. I'm putting it out there for the record. I know some people will tell me I'm crazy. I had a lender on the record in the magazine say their dream is to fully automate the system. By all means, go ahead. I just feel like you're almost creating, you will actually overcomplicate it by introducing systems that funnel things that ultimately are just acting as a funnel into your existing departments already. I just fail to see how that can possibly be something. It's undoubted that technology's played an immense role over the last year, and that certain services, especially third-party services, should have been adopting this, you know, ages ago. And we're very grateful. We know all about those ones. But this idea of bridging into this tech stratosphere, for me, I don't buy it.
No, I think I was definitely guilty of that. I think in the early days of Glenhawk, thinking, oh yeah, let's pop the fintech logo on it, let's build our own systems, and pretty quite naively, it's extremely hard to automate. And as you say, Caron, all it ends up being is a filter down into the existing departments. And at the end of the day, you're still going to have lawyers involved. Yeah, you've got AVMs, but they only apply at a certain level. And then the rate's going to be adjusted, the LTV will be adjusted. So to mainstream it across our space, I agree, it's hard. And we tried, and it didn't quite work out in the early days. And you just have to expect that bridging is clunky, it's lumpy, it's hard, it's phone calls.
That's the beauty of it. Yeah.
And that's why it's a very manual, relation driven space, which is the whole fun of bridging. And yeah, I don't think it's going to be automated, and I'm sure.
And I think it's a halfway house. I think it's the productivity part for me, and being able to have those efficiencies rather than the robots taking over. It always makes me laugh when you say, you know, robo advice. I think I'll be older and grayer than I am now, you know, that when I'm probably retired before I see anything like that happening, but it can't work in bridging. Not when you've got to look at the asset and the commerciality of it, definitely not. Should we do some quick fire questions, actually?
I suppose a bit of fun. Give us a surprising fact about yourselves that no one knows, nothing you've mentioned in the media, anything, you know, this can be anything.
I don't know how many people know this, so, you know, it might be, you know, more common. I say common knowledge, like, you know, we're not A-listers, but I was born in Cape Town, and I moved from Cape Town to London when I was 18, straight after school. And I didn't go to uni, and I just enjoyed London for what it is and every part of it. So I've done like the full shebang, and I must say I'm very proud of that. But I'm imminently moving to Kent, and I'm terrified because this is just everything I know. So that's maybe not like a surprising fact, but it's just like an interesting journey of the ups and downs and highs and lows. But yeah, moving to
halfway across the world, no problem, but another 20 miles out of London.
That's exactly it. It feels like a much bigger move. It's like 40 minutes on a train.
That's good. And Beth, same to yourself?
I don't know if people do know this, but I'm vegan and don't drink. I don't know if people know that. I get quite a few like Christmas and when people send things, I always get really fabulous alcohol and boxes of chocolates, which I pass to my partner. It's very sweet. It's really sweet. So I'm not complaining at all. But yeah, I guess people don't know that because of that. So the other thing which I put on another podcast, which I find like super cringeworthy, but it's more interesting than that, was that when I think I was 15 or 14, I went on Britain's Got Talent.
What? Wow.
Mainly just to meet Ant and Dec, to be completely honest with you. no talent, have zero talent. Yeah, I went on with some friends. We formed like a girl band, so I was drumming, and yeah, so we went on that for all the laughs and to meet Andek and got buzzed.
Did you get buzzed?
we performed to an audience. It was a big audience, and got buzzed off quite quickly, and thought it was just hilarious. It was a great experience. It was fun.
That's a very good
That's a good one. And in coming on to in life, we always have sources of inspiration and people we look up to, and we pull bits of admiration from, and we learn from. So who are your role models, whether it's now or when you were younger? I mean, who have you really taken inspiration from when you look at and go, I learn a lot from them, and I look up to them?
Okay, personally, I can't name a person. What I can do is I can distill into like the people that I get sort of inspiration from, or the type of people, and it's just basically anyone who has like pure originality of thought, because I sometimes don't know if my own opinions are my own or if they're ones that I've gathered from like a collection of what I read and what I see and what I listen to. So anyone who really thinks in an original way, so that's normally authors, poets, even stand-up. I'm obsessed with stand-up comedy, like that sort of thing. Anyone who thinks in a way that I'm like, I swear that those words have never been strung together in a sentence, that's my jam. That's what I love. So that's what's the best I could do with that, because I can't think of like a one individual that I'm like, oh, I love you.
Yeah, I love that. Good answer. Very good.
But I definitely look up to my parents. I get a lot of ideas from them. I always go to them if I'm unsure about something. I don't know if that sounds pretty lame, but I really respect their opinion about certain things, and they have really good ideas. They're really creative. They're really good fun, and I just look up to them. And then I guess maybe someone actually more recently, I love Paris Hilton. I don't know why, I just think she's awesome. And that's just like a wild card role model there, but I just cool. I don't know. I'm into her. I think she's awesome.
Well, that's something there.
Yeah.
Everyone had different types of COVID, didn't they, when they were in lockdowns? What we are now, lockdown 72, we're coming out of. I can't remember the number, but what did you pick up any skills, hobbies in that time?
I actually picked up a bona fide skill, but I just got I got a Peloton bike and started spinning. But I say it's a love-hate relationship. Anyone who has, well, no, because I've met some people recently. There's an industry group which I really regret joining now because they're extremely competitive, and I just have it for like not to, be horizontal all the time. So it's really good fun, and it has doubled up as therapy as well, because I do consider the kind of Peloton system to be really good for that. Like, it's extremely motivational. It's extremely like, get out of your head for half an hour, 45 minutes, and just think about nothing except not dying, which is great.
I got really into plants over COVID, which I think quite a lot of people did. I actually find the science behind gardening more interesting than the actual gardening bit. So I don't know why, but I just did loads of research in propagation, and I propagated a lot of plants. I propagated about 50 different types of roses last year, and 27 survived, and I planted them in the garden this weekend. So yeah, it's the first. Yeah, I moved house in October. I was living in Brixton and had a tiny balcony, which I was lucky to have in the first place, balcony, but in London. But I've moved to Farnham, and I've got a small garden, so I've been able to plant everything, and been really excited about that. So yeah, I've learned some things.
Where do you see the sector going over the next 5 years? Where do you see I suppose where are the biggest changes going to come from? Of course, we've touched on diversity. So if we part that, what other areas do you think we're going to really see some changes in?
I think distribution might change a bit. There's been this sort of cusp. I know one of the things that we were due to maybe have a chat about was about the packager, the future of the packager. But I think that maybe that is a model that's on borrowed time at this point, because it's difficult for me personally to reconcile an industry who wants to work far more widely, work with far more people in a direct basis, and then still be able to have value in something like a packager or a master broker. So I think that this could be something that changes, or it forms part of more of an M&A type future, whereby lenders are acquiring and absorbing via some sort of amoeba-like quality some of the packages and bringing them on, because that was something that happened quite a few years ago, where it made sense to have that arm within a business. So that could be something that gets revisited, because so I think that part of the market is maybe a bit tenuous, and I think it's a space to watch how active it is. You just don't see, I mean, I don't know when last any of us saw like a new packager or a new master broker launching. It's just like not really a thing that happens that frequently. So that's something, I think it's very difficult to speculate. For all the reasons that we said today, I know the things that I'd like to hope for, which is that we do become a much more sustainable industry that has an eye on the future and not just the week of completions we're in. That would be nice. But for the rest of it, I feel like it's quite crystal ball right now.
Yeah, I think we'll see more. I think that the market will definitely become increasingly more aligned with the mainstream space, but not actually be mainstream in itself. I think it definitely needs to have that clear boundary of being a specialist area. The fragmented market, I think, will change, and I think the way to be sustainable is to have less lenders but bigger organizations that are more efficient. So I think that will be the case. The life cycle lending proposition has really grown over the last few years, and new lenders that enter the space really need to have a niche. They can't say, you know, service, rates and flexibility as their USPs, which make me cringe every time they say that as a new lender. So they need to be in a really niche location, or they need to lend on very specific types of property, or loan size. They need to do something very different. So I think we'll see larger organizations, less lenders, but more niches, rather than everyone doing the same thing, because it's just not sustainable at the moment. I actually remembered what I was going to say about ego earlier. So I'm going to throw it in. I think that helps with how the market will kind of, you know, progress. And I think with bad connotations of ego in the market is when lenders badmouth other lenders. And I think we all need to be supportive of new brokers and new lenders in the space. And I think that's something you guys do really well. I know that you've been big supporters of Albatross, who launched recently. You even had a picture of you guys on LinkedIn recently at the pub or wherever you were. And I know that lots of new lenders enter the space, and because I speak to, you know, every new broker or lender that comes in, just to feel them out and see what they're doing and what they're bringing to the market. And you know, they do, some lenders do say, you know we've been bad mouthed by X, Y, and Z, and I just think it's just not really on unless there's a reason for it. And I think we all need to be much more supportive of each other. So I think that's how we'll potentially evolve over the next few years. And
I couldn't agree more. So I suppose just the final question as we wrap this up is that you've now been the interviewees. You've obviously been the interviewers. Which one do you prefer? Stick to interviewing?
I think I'll stick to being a journalist.
It's been really interesting to talk to you guys like this, because I know I haven't seen you in person for probably a year and a half or so because of COVID and things. But obviously these are the sort of questions that we chat upon. But I think you guys are like the aggregators for all the information in the market. So really interesting in doing it this way around, and just getting some of you, mining you for some of this information. It's really
Thank you for having us. It's really nice to have the tables turned. As much as we're joking about it, it's really nice to be able to, I suppose, talk about, you know, we are sort of 10 and 8 years in the tooth now, so it is quite significant, and we do feel like we get to see things from a different perspective. So thank you for the opportunity. It's been awesome.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.